Yeah, thank you guys. So I want to ask you guys a couple questions just sort of gauge what does mastery of something mean to you guys? To me, mastery means knowing when and why to use something, not necessarily how. So that's what I'll be kind of covering today is not necessarily how to do any of this stuff in Creator, but rather like when is the best case to do this, why I would want to do it this way, and just in general, what is sort of the thought process behind doing it this way. So some of you guys are probably pretty experienced, and so this beginning part will probably not be super helpful to you guys, but I want you to sort of focus less on what I'm telling you and more of like why I'm telling you this information. That's sort of the kind of goal of this session. Yeah, so today's agenda, we're going to be talking about basically how to enhance your current app's UI and UX. User experience is becoming more and more important these days. And there's lots of ways you can sort of maximize this within Creator, and also ways you can take it to the next level if you want to sort of dip your toes into that more development heavy aspect of it, as well as how to improve filtering throughout your apps. One of my favorite parts of Creator is the sort of dynamic filtering that you can do on dashboards and on reports. Sometimes what's available there on the no-code side of things isn't advanced enough, and I want to show you guys how to go an extra layer deep on on all of this. Another thing, we'll be customizing your export data. So, we're using Creator to collect all of our stuff, and everything's working good and feeling good in the system. But what if I need to get it out in an actual presentable format? How I don't want to just do an API call. I actually just want to click a button and it comes out to me in a nice PDF or something like that. How would we go about doing that and making it look good? And the last thing is I've been running into this on the pre-sale side of things a lot lately. So I actually wanted to bring this up. Again, I actually do work with real life use cases every day for being a consultant on the Creator team. So I actually like bringing what I've learned from other people or issues they've running into and shared it with you guys and how we sort of work around it with customers. But one of the things we've been running into lately is custom scheduling is kind of hard sometimes. So by default, scheduling works in a pretty straightforward way. You have a date and it goes on the date, or it goes a few days before the date. But some people need a much more dynamic way to do that, and we'll be covering how to do that at the end of this session. All right. So what's our actual problem here? So let's actually play a little bit of some pretend here, and let's say we are trying to make an app to assist managing patients at a hospital. There's a lot of stuff that we need to do. First of all, patients would have a lot of information, right? They'd have a huge intake form that's going to be covering their insurance, emergency contacts, any allergies or anything else they have in the system. It could be quite bloated very quickly, and that's not great for the user experience side of things. Also, we're gonna have to store maybe multiple files. If we're tracking their X-rays, their MRIs, any lab work or anything they're doing, that could all be going into one form. But what if we want to reference this for other parts of the hospital to use, like our technicians, or if we're on a checkup or anything like that? How would we be able to reference those if they're all in one report, and how best to sort of do file management? And again, that dynamic reporting piece. Something that's huge is it's very easy to set up in Creator where you can see records that are assigned to yourself. But how would you see records that are assigned to your department dynamically? You don't have to make a new report for every single department. How would you be able to just have one master report and then have it filtered automatically off of who's looking at it off of their department? Going that extra layer deep, like I mentioned earlier. And also exporting data in a digestible format. Again, how do I make this look nice as a PDF or anything else? And then of course, actually, how do I do any sort of custom scheduling aspect for my routine checkups or any other system that I'm working with, medications, that sort of stuff. Yeah, so dealing with large forms. Forms, for those who are not familiar with Creator, are your data structure at the end of the day. These are your custom modules. This is where your database is made out of. And so it's an important heart and soul, and the sort of the main building blocks of any Creator app user form. The problem with that is also how your people enter in their information into the system. So it can get bloated quite quickly, especially with our example, with our patient information. That's going to be at least, on a good day, maybe 50, 60 fields. And that's just too much. That's a horrible UX. That's not going to be fun for anyone to fill out. If it's if it's the patient themselves, or if it's a nurse or anything like that, that's no good on doing it that way. So how would be one of the easiest ways to sort of solve this? Well, the easiest way is a lookup field. Again, I'm sort of working with this through you guys, how I would work through this with an actual customer during like an onboarding call or anything like that. The easiest way would actually be to split up the form into multiple forms and then use a lookup field to communicate between those two forms. Lookups are, for those who do not know, are how you build relationships within Creator. This lets you point from form A to form B, and then also be able to sort of tie those things together for using on later on. I'll be bringing up lookup fields later on with another use case because it actually can be used for that too. So I wanted to sort of describe exactly what it does here. For our particular example, we can split up, let's say, our insurance side of our employee information and just have it linked directly to an insurance form for them to fill out that way. Why you'd actually want to do this besides splitting the form is maybe for analytics. You want to track on the individual level how many patients are coming in with what insurance provider, and that way it could be this kind of disconnected in one way from the patient, but also related on the patient and the actual patient form itself. So what will this actually look like to be inside of Creator? So here's our patient form. I've replaced our patient section with just a lookup field that allowed me to add a new module and add new entry to this. And I can very easily just enter in the name of my insurance, my ID in it, as well as whether or not I am in network or not. So a very, very easy way for me to be able to check all this stuff. And again, I'm replacing essentially 3 fields with 1 field. In this example. So like very easy to sort of do this nice and quick, nothing too crazy. Some people don't like doing it this way with lookups because it can make your data structure very sparse very quickly. It's, again, this sort of idea of mastery is knowing when and why you'd want to use something like this. I'll begin to showing another example of when to use lookups that might kind of put this into perspective of why you want to do it one way versus another. But the cool thing about Creator is there's never just one way to do something. So let's, instead of trying to do it our own way, let's try to actually remake it a way that exists in another system. So, for example, let's actually try to make a multi-part form, but not really. So like on Zoho Forms, this is actually directly from the Zoho Forms website. What if I want to have some sort of multi-part form where I can go from page 1 to page 2 and still keeps my information on going back and forth with it? You can do that quite easily with Creator using selection fields, or I believe they're called choice fields, also in our documentation. These are just your radar buttons and your drop downs. So what you can do is you can name your choices in there, like the name of your sections you want to do, basic information, emergency contact, insurance information, that sort of stuff. And you can put those fields into different sections on your form builder. And then on load of the form, you can hide and show those sections based off of what you're selecting, and then have another workflow that will actually hide and show those fields when you do a user input on that selection field. So this way, you're splitting your form, quote unquote, but it's still all in one big form. If you ever need that, some people sort of prefer this method. So this is what that looks like. Basically, on load of the form, I hid all my stuff besides my patient information, and then actually on here, as I click through all these buttons, I'm hiding and showing these different fields in here. So this allows me to keep all of my fields still under one form for whatever reason. No need to have to do a fetch or any other query to be able to get my information. It's all in the same form, but as a UI UX experience, this is much nicer. This is much easier for me to do, much less of a headache to do, and really the workflow for this is nothing too crazy. It's some basic basic deluge on this. In fact, I believe you could probably even do this no code if you really wanted to. So the key takeaways for this: lookups are your primary way to communicate with other forms. You can be doing this to split your forms. You could also be just doing this if you want to have a secondary entry on your information elsewhere on your system for tracking analytics or anything like that in the future. And don't underestimate the hide and show options on the no code and on the deluge part of it. You can do it on multiple sections, multiple fields. You can do it on load, on user input. So you can really make your forms feel more dynamic, and that will really lend itself to having a better UX UI experience for the user. So dealing with multiple files, I'm sure anyone who's messed with files in Creator knows that the second you need to have more than one file per record, things can get out of hand pretty easily. And there's several different ways to sort of have a best practice to sort of do this. So for our example, we're going to need to have to upload many files at the same time. We don't know how many. So by default, if I was sort of doing this real quickly and I didn't know what I was doing, I would just drag over multiple file upload fields. I don't know, we'll probably need 5 at the most. Also, I'll just drag over 5 fields here. That should be fine, right? What if I need 6? And also, what if I only need 1? That's going to not look good on my database side of things. I'm only going to be using one out of my 5 fields. It doesn't look good. There's not really a good file handling or just general data structures in general. Of course, if I also want to associate this with a single record, I don't want to have just a lookup field to a patient, and then another lookup field to a patient, and another lookup field to a patient. That's not really what I'm wanting to do here. Also, if the information is different, what if I have X-rays for one file, and I have MRIs for another, and I have lab work for another, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It can balloon very quickly. So the next easiest way to sort of try to do this is subforms. So right here to the right of the text is just a generic like receipt form. Try to imagine making this with Creator, which is like the default fields. Like doing date, like the merchant name, the phone number, all this stuff, the sold to, all that information, that's quite easy. That's like maybe like 10 fields to sort of do. But the second you get to the description, the quantity, the price unit, and the line total part, that's like 40 fields. And they're all the same stuff. There's no need to do that. Instead, what you can do is use a subform. Subforms are miniature forms that exist inside of a pre-existing form. And you can use these to sort of capture like data over and over again. These are your multiple entry forms. These are your multiple ways to do this. This could also be used with file upload fields and image fields and any of the other upload fields in Creator. You could also have these alongside it. So if I also wanted to track a description for my file upload field, I can do that. I can do multiple in here. This will allow us to track our multiple medical files, and they can be whatever we want them to be. And then we could also use another field to describe what they are or anything else that we wanted to sort of do on this. And we could actually have this existing alongside maybe the main patient form, or if we want to have a separate form for that, we can do that too. Lots of different ways you can sort of kind of go about this. So yeah, just basically here's what it looks like. I have a lookup field to my main patient information form, and then I just have a subform of all their files. So this would be super easy for a nurse or anyone on site to just be able to look at. I can just look up the patient's name, their email, or maybe their insurance information, find them in the report, and I can see all their files right there. Super easy to grasp. The issue's going to come into is, what if I need to get these files outside of the subform? What if I want to reference them in a checkup form, or if I want to reference them in an automated email workflow we have set up? Not super easy to do with a subform. Subforms are great for keeping everything together in one nice little package. But what if I actually do want my data more sparse, more available, and easier to access from the other parts of my application? You can do that quite easily with lookups. Surprise, I told you we need it again. Lookups are able to support a many-to-one relationship. Does anyone know what many-to-one means? So many-to-one is basically you're able to have one single entity, like on this picture, and you're able to point over to different records or items in your system, and those systems can either know that they're being pointed to or not, depending on what you want to do. But at the end of the day, this lets you basically associate other parts of the system, multiple parts of your system, all in one little point. But they're still separate, unlike a subform. So that's sort of the advantage of doing it this way. So this would allow us to have a situation similar to our subform, where we have everything under one umbrella. However, we're able to see this as another portion of our application, so we can reference it with other lookups or with any other workflow or whatever we're doing in our system much easier. Yeah, so what this sort of looks like is when I made this lookup field, I selected it as a multi-select lookup field. I'm able to upload any of my files in here, pretend these are x-rays and MRIs. I don't have access to any of those, but I'm able to upload multiples of these. I am associating them with my patient. And then when I submit this, they will actually show up in my actual files thing, and they're actually associated with the internal ID of my patient here. So yeah, you can do stuff like that. With workflows, you can even take this to another level if you wanted to have more communication over here. I was trying to keep this kind of simple when I was making this, but yeah, no, you can really take this to kind of an advanced level, do what you want. That sort of stuff. And don't just thinking about applying this to files or to records like it. Try thinking about why I did it this way. I didn't do this because I wanted to track files and stuff. I did it this way because I wanted these files to exist so I could associate them later on with something if I needed to. That's that sort of mastery part of this. That's where sort of this sort of thought process and decision making sort of comes from when you're making an app, when you're being a developer, and doing it that way. Mastery and sort of like the when and the why of this is more of a several good decisions, sort of in a row, not necessarily just one good decision. It's so some people say one bad apple spoils the bunch, but we actually know that's not necessarily true. You're gonna have one bad part of an application, and then the rest of it is gold, and people would only complain a little bit about the bad part of the application. And same thing goes for good decisions, though. You can have only one good decision in a bad app; it's still gonna be a bad app. So the sort of mastery part is more of like lots of small things that sort of add up at the end of the day to make a good application. So some key takeaways here. Subforms can be used to keep everything all in one place for you to be able to use and to reference and to be able to have some control over in your application, as well as having any of those additional associated fields all in one go visible on the parent record. Lookup fields are great for keeping them as individual records and still associating them, but also being able to use them later on in other forms or in other workflows for reference or for whatever reason on that. So we've talked a lot about some UI, some UX stuff. What if we need even more dynamic stuff in our forms? What if I want HTML, CSS? What if I want instead of an image field to be like holding an image, I actually want an image to pop up whenever I select something? How would I even go about doing that in Creator? There's actually kind of a unassuming field you can use for this. So if we actually wanted to display something like an image in one of our forms, or we wanted to sort of customize our form beyond what the native form builder has access to, it's notes. Yes, so a lot of people don't know this, but node fields can actually accept both Deluge and HTML and CSS into its components. You can load HTML and CSS into a node field via the Deluge workflow, or even just in the general form builder part of this. And it's super easy to actually load up Creator images into here. So if you check like the documentation on how images are stored in Creator, there actually is an internal URL you can plug in and play in here. All you basically just need is a record ID. Everything else sort of follows a fixed pattern based off of your application. And you can throw in your image in here. Common request that I get this all the time actually is, hey, I'm using Creator for some secretary, for some front desk person, for some check-in form they want to do, and whenever someone gives us their name or their ID or whatever, when we plug that in, we want to see a picture of them if they're a repeating visitor, so we actually know it's them. That would be very useful for our nurses. They're at the front desk, they're checking in a patient. Hey, yeah, I was here last week. Okay, let me pull up your patient information. Hey, that's not you, or hey, that is you, and that could save the nurse a lot of trouble in the head of time. Yeah, so what that looks like is just you can see my add note here, I kind of left that there so you guys can see what's happening there. And then the second I select a patient on my lookup, it fetches the image that I already have on that form, and it just displays there in the note field. So I'm using images for this example, but you can do this for anything. If you just want to have a dialog box that displays some generic information about the patient or whatever you're pulling in from your lookup, you could do that. And again, this is completely exposed to HTML and CSS. If you ask around, you'll very quickly find out I'm not the HTML and CSS guy on the team. I'm very bad at it. I went to school for Python, and so I know back-end development like the back of my hand. But you asked me to make a web page, and the best I can do is it's white and has some black text on it. So they'll be asking me to help with that. But this is a general idea. Again, the why of why you'd want to do this, why you'd want to do it this way versus some other method to do it. Yeah, lastly, I mentioned exposing it to CSS, and while you can actually expose a node field to CSS, there's actually something else you can do. Whenever you make a page on Creator, a page component, you can drag over what's called an HTML snippet. This allows you to basically do custom HTML and CSS scripting. What a lot of people do not know is you can embed, it's called a style-based URL. You can embed a form or report in that HTML snippet, and that exposes the entire form and report to HTML and CSS. So basically, this will allow us to, with a combination of pre-existing deluge workflows that exist already in the form, to mimic some light JavaScript. This will allow you to actually more closely recreate that multi-part form I showed you guys earlier from Zoho Forms. So instead of having those radio buttons where you click through everything, if I actually take that form and I plug it into an HTML snippet via that style-based URL method, and then I run some CSS over this, you can actually make a very fancy multi-part form. So here's an example. Before I take credit for this is actually Tim's. Tim made this for me. I asked him to. And this is basically that exact same radio button. It says background inside and outside in this example because this was kind of testing it. But this is a radio button, but we're just running HTML and CSS over it, and this is actually embedded in a page. And so we're able to completely change how that works. You could apply this to not just radio buttons, but anything. That image example, maybe whenever I click that image, you could have that the HTML step in CSS run on that to actually make a proper looking profile, with a frame and some information under it, that sort of stuff. The sky's really the limit with doing something like this. And you have complete control over how the forms are interacting with each other and that sort of stuff. And this is all being built on top of an existing deluge workflow. So no even need for JavaScript. And when you do a method like this, it just works naturally alongside our pre-existing workflows in Creator. So it's an extension at the end of the day. Yeah. So some key takeaways. Our node fields can be used with HTML and CSS through Deluge or through the default form builder at the same time. And you can do some fun stuff with it, like loading images and dialog boxes and that sort of stuff. But if you really are comfortable with web dev, then you know your HTML, you know your CSS, you can actually just throw in everything into an HTML snippet and go crazy as much as you want to. You can manipulate your fields, the results of it, and it's be working alongside your existing Deluge workflows. You won't be having to reinvent the wheel ever when you're doing it this way. Yeah, lots of examples you can sort of do it with that way. Hopefully that was a good explanation and a good sort of use case. You guys can see how to sort of do that. But yeah, I think we're now through the UI and the UX portion, so we're kind of covering more of some of the other stuff that we're kind of going over, specifically the filtering aspect of everything. So filtering, again, this is one of my favorite parts of Creator. So it's why Creator is so easy to use once you are actually outside of the admin and developer portion of this. Once you set up your filters properly, the app kind of just runs itself. You don't have to make new reports. You don't have to making new dashboards or pages. The filtering can kind of do all the work for you. The problem with it sometimes is the default filtering that exists is completely limited by the no-code aspect of Creator. There are dynamic system variables, yes, like Zoho.login user ID. You could, I know it because I I use it every day. That will fetch the current logged in user's email, but it won't fetch anything else. So I can't tell it by default, hey, yes, I know this person's email, but I actually want more information about them. What department are they a part of? What's their employee ID? that sort of, who's their manager, that sort of stuff. I can't just fetch that. And you can sort of cheat this by using some dummy fields. Sort of whenever you have a relationship via lookup, you can fill in some dummy fields with some information there, so that you'd be able to check that with all the information. But that requires some forward thinking, and that's great and all, but it's not easily changeable, and it's way easier to add fields than it is to remove. So if something changes later on in your process, you're now stuck with this legacy form, this legacy code. Not the best way to do it. And I went a little bit out of order here, but also besides all that, if you do all that stuff on a form, that's just one form. What if you want to reuse this across multiple? That's going to be it's not going to scale well. It's just not a good way to do it. There is actually a very easy way around this that a lot of people don't know about, and that's actually using using functions. So you can actually plug a function into a pre-existing filter or other parts of your application in Creator, and this will allow you to sort of go that extra layer deep, because you can reference this in the no-code portion or the low-code. And this will allow you to have a reusable piece that you can use across your forms, reports, pages, everything else, all in the system. So for example, that department thing I mentioned earlier, what if we want our nurses to only be able to see the patients that are assigned to their apartment? I'm assigned to the ICU, and I want to see all my ICU patients, but not necessarily ones directly assigned to me. I want to see everyone in this part of the building. Well, it's super easy. You can make a function like below, where I'm checking my employee info based off of a system variable, Zoho.login user ID, and then that is storing my department information, so I can pull that department information and return it, and then I can actually just directly link it to the department ID based off of that. So you wouldn't be able to do this by default. You'd need a function to sort of give this extra layer. And the cool thing about this is just one layer deep. If you needed, this would actually work continuously for how as long as you had some common link somewhere through all of your data, you'd be able to make a custom function to be able to pull this information in. So this is super useful. I have a horrible habit personally of not using functions enough in Creator. Creator is just so easy to just build a quick workflow, get the job done, and then sort of that sort of rapid prototyping mindsets that we've sort of been talking about whenever Creator has been coming up during this track. But if you have some forward thinking and you're able to sort of like, oh yeah, I would need to use this like 12 different places in my app, just make it a function. Try to get a very simple function that kind of started, and you can sort of do this instead, and get it to work for everything. So the other way to do it, and this is sort of referencing again this multiple component part. What if I want to do this on a dashboard? Like, yeah, I could make a function and then apply it on everything on the dashboard. That way, but like, what if like I have HTML snippets and like all this other stuff? Like, I don't want to have to keep constantly referencing the function it's calling like if it's an API call, for example. What if like you're pulling some information in from the CRM, and you have like a dashboard with like 20 components on it? That means every single time that dashboard's loading, it's going to call that function 20 times, and that's 20 API calls right there. What if you just want to do it once, and then have it trickle down to the rest of your components? That's what page variables are. So page variables, or at least I believe early last year, maybe the year before, and they basically are one big deluge function that runs on the back end, or that runs on the basically the back end of every single page. You can throw a function into there or any other deluge script, and it'll run just the one time, and then you can assign a variable to it that you can use out through the rest of your dashboard, which is super nice, super easy to use. So for example, here's the exact same code. I didn't actually use a function here. I could have. It actually would have had the exact same result, but I assigned this to a page variable, which is my employee department. So that's actually a page variable for here. And then I'm able to just again use the exact same filter where I'm just pointing towards my my page variable instead of my function. and I'm good to go. That'll run just the one time. It's way more efficient. You're technically, only doing one deluge action versus 20 or however more you have in your components, and you're good to go there. I don't really show this in this picture on here, but you can also use page variables in your panels. So if you need any custom calculations or anything, instead of using the basic accurate data like summations or mean or anything, or maximum or min, any of those on your panels, you can actually customize exactly what data you want on Deluge, and then display those in your panel. I think the most common example is whenever you log into a dashboard and it says, "Hello, your name," that's just that, essentially. So that's some where you can sort of take this to the next level. And again, sort of focus on the why you would do it this way. This is just a more efficient way to do it. It's sort of a best practice versus, well, the way I do it works is just fine. That's sort of the difference on this. That's all. So yeah, key takeaways. If you can expose it to Deluge, you can customize it. If you take anything away from the session, just Deluge is king. Deluge will let you, as long as you can get some aspect of the Deluge in there, you'll be able to break open Creator and sort of do what you want with it. That's hopefully what you can do. Don't be afraid. Also, if your database has too many layers to it, using functions, using page variables, you can always keep breaking through those layers and filtering and doing the data the way you want it to, regardless. As long as there's some common link there between all your database, as long as that's set up properly, you should be good to go, no matter the case. So yeah, and then functions, of course, work in both reports and pages. Technically, also forums. I didn't put that there, but for the for the topic of filtering, it works on reports and pages. And then, of course, page variables and page scripts let you apply that across multiple components simultaneously with only using one Deluge execution without having to use anything else. So, printing and PDFs. This is kind of a wild card. It's not really related to what we've sort of been talking about, but I know enough people struggle with this whenever I talk with them that I wanted to bring this up. So what if I actually want to get my data out of Creator? And I don't just mean exporting it or using an API call to sort of get rid of it. How do I actually get this out as a presentable PDF file to my boss, or like a brochure or a nice email? I don't want to send them a picture of a Excel spreadsheet. How do I sort of customize this? And what if I want to actually do more than one record? What if I want to have like a list of my patient's appointments, for example, and sort of return that in a nice little PDF? How would I even do that? What's sort of the use case for this? Yeah, so my example I actually give is like, what if we want to, one of our patients is transferring, and what if we want to send a nice brochure on the patient's information, like their medications, their past surgeries? What if we want to send something like that to the new hospital so they know what how they should best handle the new patient? Well, the native features, and this will be kind of boring, most people will probably know about this, is record templates and Canvas. So record templates are basically, in both Canvas, are actually just PDF builders. They basically will let you build and customize your own PDF for getting your data out of Creator in some way. What the difference really is on here is record templates can be used for multiple records at the same time. So you can basically say, hey, on all of these records, you can select them on the report. And when you export them, if the export is set to run on a record template, you'll actually will get a record template of all those records at the same time as sort of like an itemized list of things. Again, useful for medications, useful for multiple visits or something like that, or multiple patients, whatever your use case would actually dictate for that. Canvas is a much more powerful PDF builder, but it's limited to only doing one application at a time. What you're seeing over here on the right actually is a example of something built via Canvas. Has a sort of drag and drop database. If you're actually using the multi-select lookup example I gave earlier, you would actually be able to see these as a related box in your Canvas builder. So it does work on multiple records in that aspect, just not on the same report. It would have to be related in some way. So we can use this very easy to make a brochure for our patient. We use Canvas to sort of do that. So here's a quick example. So maybe this is one of our patients. up top actually is you can actually see your canvas view and the detail view of any record, and so maybe we have a workflow running on it too, so they can see if maybe their medicines are coming in properly. But besides that, below everything else on here, we're able to see everything about them, or see their address, their email, their phone, anything else about them that we want to store on here. And can all be sort of come onto this sort of related list, and being able to show up and be visible for the canvas. And you can export this as a PDF, or send it as an email attachment to any user with a workflow. And again, you can tell who made who. I made this, so again, non HTML and design is not my forte, but I hope you guys understand what this is looking like. Yeah, so that is just with the default data that exists in Creator. What if you want to add some stuff to it? What if you want to say, like, hey, this is my patient so-and-so, this is their information, these are their medicines, and you actually want to have that text sort of visible there on that brochure, and you want it to be the dynamic and sort of customize what's sort of going on here. Well, for that, we can actually leverage Zoho Writer. How many of y'all have used Zoho Writer before? Okay, that's a lot. You guys should. Zoho Writer is, like, no joke, a surprisingly powerful platform, and it's usually included with any Zoho subscription for free. Zoho Writer is, like, incredible. So by default, you can actually add or link it to some fields that exist in a creator form, and then you can take that field ID that exists in a Writer and associate them with a integration task with Deluge to Writer, and very easily pass your information via a call over to Writer, and it'll go ahead and populate that information for you. And again, because you're doing this through Deluge, you can customize it. So let me show you a quick example of what this looks like. So this is me just passing those fields that exist in Zoho Writer with the data that I have from Creator. And then it's just going to populate Zoho Writer and then store the document as a new document for me. Or I could do a merge and send it to someone via email as well in there. But this allows me to have complete control over everything. You can even do some fun stuff like associating like work drive IDs with it. Sky's the limit. Like I said, Writer is very, very, very powerful. I would actually suggest you guys check it out for using it for stuff like this. Super handy. It's, again, this coming back to the sort of mastery idea of why you'd want to do this. Canvas is out of the box, and it's super easy to spin up. It's all drag and drop and easy to do. But Writer would be good for a much more like heavy use case of, well, I want these automatically store my PDFs whenever I run this workflow. I don't have to go in and export these all the time. That's something Writer would be able to come in with this, on top of the extra customization you can do in the system. So, what if you have a nice dashboard and you actually want to get this out as a PDF? Maybe you want to send your boss the amount of medications that are coming in for the entire hospital, or the current sales levels, or anything like that. So you already have a nice dashboard, and I don't want to have to make a full Writer merge workflow to send all this information. Like what would I want to sort of have to reinvent the wheel again? So you can actually export pages as both PDFs, and actually directly to print them as well. A lot of people don't know this, but actually in the properties of any page, you can just toggle enable PDF or enable print, and then at the top right of your dashboard, you have a nice little print button or PDF button, and it'll go ahead and export your entire dashboard as a PDF for you to use. I will say, this has some personal experience. You might have to have a little bit different reformatted dashboard for this to come out in a nice way. But this is super easy. It'll save you a lot of time. Again, I said this part of the session is kind of weird, but this has come up often enough that I wanted to bring it up to you guys, because this actually is something that occurs quite regularly for things. Yeah, so key takeaways. Record template and Canvas are your built-in tools for just general exporting and sort of getting things out of the system. And then if you need more flexibility, you got your Writer merge. for getting things out of Writer. And also, I didn't say it on here, but also if you want to automatically store items as a PDF, get them out of Creator and store them automatically as a PDF on another system. And then if you need a lot of flexibility with like pre-built data that's in your system, again, leveraging those page variables and page scripts in HTML, you can use the built-in page export option to sort of get it out of Creator that way. So last one, schedules. So schedules are very powerful. Again, probably another weakness on my end is I don't probably use schedules enough for whenever I'm doing something. But schedules basically run whenever a date on the selected schedule matches the current date, or if that date field matches an existing field on a form. Whatever way you set up your schedule to work. Which is great in like 90% of most use cases. But what if you have like a really flexible, like, well, the date's not always going to be consistent, especially when I need to repeat it later on. For example, routine checkups. I personally don't go to the doctor enough, like once every 2 years. So I would have a very long routine checkup set up on my workflow on this app. But what if I'm a cancer patient seeking immunotherapy? I would need to go in like every other week. If I want to have those on the same form, I can't, unless I do the trick I'm about to show you guys. So what you can do is you can just make another form and just call it schedules. You can then link your parent form to this new schedule form that you made. And whenever you first make an entry on that parent form, you could have it automatically add the first schedule, the first date to this new schedule form. This is where your schedule workflow will actually live and run on the second schedule form that we've made. I'll show you guys an example if this is confusing, but this will allow you to basically use that parent form as a controller. You'll be able to say, okay, now that we've run the schedule workflow, check the parent with Deluge. Oh, this person needs a checkup tomorrow. Go ahead and make a new schedule record in the schedule form for tomorrow, and keep doing that. Of course, you would need some sort of criteria to shut off the automatic recurring schedules, which I do in my example coming up. But this way, you could have that sort of biannually routine checkup live alongside on the same form as that every other week patient, and they wouldn't conflict with each other in any way. Very, very sort of clever way to get around this. So here's the full example, where I select my nurse and my patient, and then so I'm using 30 days in my example, and that goes ahead and automatically creates a schedule in my schedule workflow. And then if I go ahead and show both me adding the workflow to the new schedule form. And I'll let this run multiple times. You guys need me to stop for pictures, just let me know. But yeah, on the actual schedule workflow part of this is probably the part where I'll stop, so you guys can see what's going on here. See the magic. So basically what I'm doing is I fetch the information from the parent form, the routine checkups, and then I send the patient an email that they have a routine checkup coming up. And then I go back to the parent form, check if their routine is complete or canceled or not. And then if it's not, I go ahead and add the days that exist in that form for however often they want a routine checkup. And then I will go ahead and add a new record based off of those days being added to it based off of the previous one. So it'll just keep doing that over and over again until the criteria is met, where someone manually marks that routine checkup phase as complete on the system. So I'm going to go ahead and actually manually execute this using the ID of that schedule. And there it goes and executes it, and you should see that I'll have a second schedule generated now in my schedule workflow, and it didn't mess with the parent at all. But yeah, that's just a general idea of it. So that's sort of a general idea of where you can, again, leverage the customization of Creator to sort of do what you want, and like that. So that's actually the basic key takeaways here. Actually, is don't be limited by, again, the no code aspect of Creator. Of the I have, well, my schedule workflow only runs off of date fields that exist in the form. Don't look at it that way. Look at it as, well, how can I leverage the other parts of Creator to sort of have this point there and then point back with Deluge on anything. And you don't have to use the inbuilt no code criteria system. You can use Deluge to decide this for you if needed. And again, if you take anything away from this session, if you can expose anything to Deluge, you can customize it. That's going to be your key here of being able to solve problems and be able to think outside of the box for use cases. So thank you guys.